Hey guys, this is Tim with Tabletop Terrors. I'm here as always with my brother James. Today we're going to talk about how you can reinvent traps for tabletop RPGs. We're going to give you at least 3 really good, actionable things you can do at your table today, as soon as you're done watching this video, that are going to really change the way that you're able to use traps. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in.
So traps are a really cool way in your adventures to create suspense and sort of do something other than a regular combat encounter. But if the trap itself is predictable or boring, it really loses the effect.
Yeah, it almost does the opposite. If you have a trap that's supposed to create tension and it's really just kind of a dud, the encounter can feel kind of flat, and smarter players will almost think, oh wait, no, maybe there's another trap underneath this trap.
Exactly.
And you don't want to be trying to think up traps on the fly. But if you are, here's what we're going to show you. So let's jump into the 3 things that we think are going to just really change the way you look at traps. Okay, so here's tip number 1. And this may sound simple, but really think about it. Use monsters as traps. Here's what I mean. No matter what system you're using, no matter what tabletop RPG you're playing, take a monster, something that's statted out already. Then, instead of it being a monster, make that a trap. This is an incredible way to come up with unique ideas on the fly. This works best with monsters that have special abilities. So what you can do is, if you're thinking, well, you know, what kind of a trap? A lot of people immediately go to spike traps, pit traps, just standard stuff. Well, if you take that monster, make their special ability the trap. It may sound super simple, but it will get you thinking from a different angle than you might have been thinking when you were trying to come up with a trap on your own.
So we're going to go ahead and give you a few examples from Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition and show you sort of how this works.
Right.
So one of the main benefits you get from this is you know the challenge rating of a monster, and you know how that all works out. So that allows you to easily gauge how hard or, you know, how dangerous a trap could be.
Exactly.
So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a 1/2 challenge rating. Now that sounds pretty weak, but right. When we started looking, we started to realize that some of these monsters that only have a 1/2 challenge rating have some really awesome abilities that are so debilitating. So our first example is the cockatrice. Now the cockatrice has a its bite, I believe. If it attacks you, it can petrify you.
Right.
Which is really crazy. So if the trap is triggered, you can have it do it some piercing damage, and then the target has to succeed a Constitution save.
Exactly. Or else
it begins to be petrified.
Right. Now, I wouldn't think of that off the cuff. I wouldn't just immediately think, well, I'm going to do a petrification trap. So starting with the cockatrice, starting with the challenge rating of a 1/2, I know, okay, this is kind of an interesting thing. And then just use the special ability right out of the book. You don't even have to think of the damage or anything of the trap. Just literally just jot down the damage it does, and then the Constitution saving throw, and then there you go.
Exactly. And I would think that were really strong if I came up with it, if I wanted to petrify, say, level 3 character. But, you know, we looked at the challenge rating. So it should be, depending on their Constitution save and everything, they should be able to survive.
Exactly. Working down the 1/2 challenge rating, we're going to talk about a good old-fashioned vine blight. Now, if you're looking in the monster manual, it's under blight, vine. But basically, this thing does bludgeoning damage, and it has a special ability to grab the player. So what if the trap itself grapples the player after it does the bludgeoning damage? Now, it's easy to reskin if you're thinking, well, what, a vine trap? No, make it a chain. You know what I mean?
Or ropes or any sort of string. It absolutely doesn't matter.
Yeah, and so even taking it a step further, I know that there is another ability the Vine Blight has. It, for more or less, it kind of does like a druid entangle kind of situation. Make magical chains come out of the floor. This makes the trap more dangerous because you're not just having the chain grapple the player who accidentally set it off, but if within the radius of the Vine Blight's attack, magical chains come from the ground, now the other players are feeling and regretting this, exactly. This failed trap save. So that is just another example. So number 2, a Vine Blight immediately puts my head in a different mindset of, okay, I don't think I would have come up with a rope trap or an entangle trap.
Exactly. And outside of that sterile dungeon, it'd be a really interesting trap to be sprung while the players are fighting someone else. because that makes the whole difficult terrain that much more interesting, but maybe they can do some cool stuff. It just opens so many cool avenues for your players to have a good time.
Exactly.
So in the same vein, you can also go ahead and take other monsters that maybe don't have special abilities, or just in general you may not want to use their special abilities, and you can make old reliable traps. Right. So in this case, the Magma Method has sort of a cone of fire ability. Exactly. It's a half challenge rating, so you know that it already gives you the radius and the damage and everything that is suitable for your players, but it allows you to take just about any monster in the monster manual and sort of use their attack on your players.
Exactly.
Just sprouting from a wall or something, it's all written for you. We're just moving it from one thing to another, but it doesn't have to be a special ability. So tip number 2 is what we call circumstantial traps. Now, these are traps that aren't necessarily mechanisms, nor were they put there on purpose by someone, right. But these are hazards in, say, a dungeon or a tower or wherever your players are.
Yeah, even a forest or a glacier, wherever it is.
But it allows you to give stats to something that, well, usually wouldn't have stats necessarily, because it's not a pit trap that was dug by someone. It's a pit that's there, and if the player's fall in it, well, now it's a trap suddenly.
Exactly. Well, so what we'll do is let's jump in, and we'll give you a few examples of this.
So if your players are on a cliff, you can make it so that rocks are falling and boulders are coming toward them. Or what you're able to do is there's the rolling sphere trap inside of the Dungeon Master's Guide, and you can just take that and apply it to the rolling boulders that just so happen to be coming down from the mountain that's very high up and is experiencing some breakage.
Exactly. And so this allows you an opportunity to place a trap scenario where a trap wouldn't normally be, and that way you can still have the tension that we were talking about earlier at the beginning of the video, just while they're climbing up a cliff face. All right, so here's another one. This is one of my favorites. If you're doing kind of an adventure that's let's say it's a castle, okay? I think instead of there just being a pit trap in the middle of a castle, which in most cases won't make much sense.
Yeah.
If people live there probably wouldn't be such a thing.
Yeah.
But what if your players are crossing from, say, like a rampart to a rampart? On that bridge, what if the castle's under siege and the bridge is collapsed? And so you have a bunch of dead soldiers inside this crumbled location. Their armor, their shields, their swords, their spears. That would effectively be a pit trap if you fell on it.
Exactly.
So it's an excuse to reskin a pit trap with blades in a situation where that would probably seem like it would break the world a little bit or be out of place. So that's the second example, would be a pit trap because sharp objects fell down a hole, during a siege.
So for our last example, we're going to go to the forest. So say in a forest there's maybe a tree that has poisonous thorns on it. It allows you to put them several places without, again, nobody set these up. These are just trees in a forest that your player characters are in, and you can just go ahead and take the poisonous darts, or poisonous needle, I believe, trap that's found in the Dungeon Master's Guide and apply it to these trees. Now, in this case, they aren't necessarily shooting out or sprung by anything. They could be if you want, if the PCs do something. But it's more like if they're fighting and for some reason they hit a tree, or if otherwise somebody, touches one or trips and falls. It's like, it's more just, again, circumstantial. It's there, and you have the stats already done for it, just in case something happens. Again, it creates an interesting situation where otherwise there may not have been one.
Exactly. So finally, the third tip. Don't only use dexterity-based traps. I imagine a cloaked rogue squatted down at a lock using 2 bronze implements while the rest of the party holds their breath. That's just the stock.
That's the rogue disarms the trap.
That's it. That's what I imagine. Fun for the rogue.
Of course.
But this is especially helpful if your party doesn't have a rogue or a trap, type setter, or no matter what, if it's in a fantasy setting and it's your hacker, or not a fantasy setting, if it's a sci-fi setting and it's your hacker, the person who would have to do this kind of thing, make it so that you can use other abilities instead of dexterity. Here's what we're talking about.
So if, say, there's a spring-loaded blade trap, that could potentially be somehow, stopped by a rogue.
Right.
The idea is if you're someone that's very strong in your party, say a fighter or really anybody with a high strength attribute, decides, well, instead of trying to disarm this because maybe it's dangerous or they can't find the mechanism,
or you don't have a rogue,
exactly,
right?
Or there's no rogue. This is the only way you're getting around it. What he's going to try to do, he or she is going to try to hold this thing while everybody else walks by.
Like, I imagine them just holding the spring. And of course, you gotta massage it and make it make sense. But I imagine the fighter or the whoever, like you said, whoever's strongest, just holding this coil while their muscles are just tensing. Like, I don't know if you saw Expendables 2. There's a part where they're trying to get something out of a safe, and Terry Cruz's giant biceps that are the size of my head are like bulging as he holds the safe door. That kind of thing.
Exactly. So it allows, again, a non-combat encounter, or maybe it is, but still it allows for somebody other than the rogue or someone that's very deft and dexterous to disarm a trap and help the party. It allows someone else to shine.
That was good alliteration.
Another way to do it, and really we're just going down a list of abilities, but
right.
Another way to do it is having a sentient trap or a sentient door that, again, you can't be just deft of hand and trick this thing. It's more or less a person that's stopping you. They just have to be made of stone or metal or otherwise obstructive. And require it to require a bluff check or maybe a diplomacy check to get by. Bonus points if the players come up with a really good reason. So say the door, decides that it's supposed to only let guards in. So of course they're going to try to bluff their way past. It's going to create a really cool role-playing encounter for your players. Again, not just to use the brass implements and the tiny lock. They have to actually, complete a role-playing encounter to get through this door.
Exactly, and it also gives that person who has the really high charisma an opportunity to disarm a trap. Just creates a different context, which I just think it can spice up a game when that person feels like the one who helped the covert mission.
Exactly.
That kind of a thing. So yeah. Now, finally, one of the things I want to talk about is you can actually do a few of those things in tandem with one another. Matt Click and I, Matt Click from A Fistful of Dice, check out his channel. Matt Click was doing his Umbercloaks adventure, and he and I came up with what I think is a really cool door. And of course, I picked James's brain, that's assumed. But it was a door, if you watch the adventure, then you'll see, if not, tiny spoiler alert, it required a strength check to open a piece of it up after they did a diplomacy check and then allowed the rogue to pick the lock. And I think it was Lewis Coombs, I think is his name, who used his Ranger's Rats as the lockpick. So it was just a cool role-playing flavor thing. Sorry if I mispronounced your name, Lewis. The idea is that door is a combination of multiple people using multiple stats. And to me, that's kind of like an Uber trap. The fighter's holding back something so that it is using the strength. The rogue is doing the lockpick thing, and then the person with the high charisma is basically keeping the door's attention, like, hey, look at us, we're not trying to break into you right now. But those are just some ways where you can use different ability scores instead of the good old, rogue with a dex getting into a door or disarming a trap.
Exactly. And again, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, all of these ideas allow you to create really cool, memorable situations inside of your adventures for your players. So while sometimes it's cool if there's just a trap on the ground and they missed it, they step on it, it hurts them, all they do is write down on their sheet, how many hit points it took away. Whereas in this case, they had to do a lot more, and they're going to talk about that afterward. And you were able to, basically find in the Dungeon Master's Guide by reskinning stuff all of the stats you needed so that it wasn't too dangerous or unfair.
Exactly. So there you have it. Those are 3 very potent ways that are really simple to reinvent traps in your game. Now, if you like those 3 concepts, if you see the description of this video down below there's a link that goes to a Pay What You Want PDF. There'll be all kinds of other examples, and if you click on it, you can get that now.
You can also find the subscribe link down below. Subscribe if you like this video. You can find more things like this. And we want to hear what some of your interesting traps are.
Definitely.
We went through just a few interesting, quick examples, but if you guys have some cool ideas, especially in the context of how you used them in your home game, let us know. Leave them in the comments, and we want to hear from you.
Absolutely. You can always email us at tabletopterrors@gmail.com just to say hi. We'd love to hear how things are going. And if you don't want to leave a comment below, that's also how you can tell us about your traps and how they affected your campaign world.
All right, guys, this has been Encounter Elements. And until next time, visit tabletopterrors.com. But we'll see you on the next one.
All right, guys. Talk to you soon.